When my husband's body was brought back, I cried until I almost fainted. I arranged for cremation immediately. On the day of the funeral, my husband's ex-girlfriend walked in with a child, saying that it was my husband's biological child. They wanted to recognize their ancestor. I helped the mother and child up from the ground inside. I understand how you feel. It's right for you to recognize your ancestor, but unfortunately, we can't do a DNA test on the ashes. Hearing this, the ex-girlfriend became anxious. What? You cremated Yates? I looked at her with an innocent face. I just wanted Yates to rest in peace. All the guests were praising my deep affection and generosity, but I sneered in my heart. My good husband, who worked hard to make money all his life, was willing to fake his death and run away with his ex-girlfriend, leaving behind an incalculable amount of property. Why wouldn't I give him a proper send-off? 1. When my husband died, his ex-girlfriend came to the funeral with a child, claiming to be his biological child. Upon learning that I had cremated my husband, his ex-girlfriend staggered and almost fell. Why did you cremate Yates so quickly? What were you trying to do? I wiped my tears, but sneered inwardly. What was I trying to do? Of course, I was trying to inherit the billions of dollars in assets. 3 days ago, I received news that my husband had died while on a business trip. I rushed to the funeral home heartbroken, but I heard my husband, who was supposed to be dead, talking to someone. Rebecca, once I get rid of that woman, we can be together forever. Yates was wearing a dark morning suit, holding a woman in his arms. It was his ex-girlfriend, Rebecca. I staggered and almost lost my footing. Rebecca hit Yates' chest coquettishly. You're so bad you actually came up with the idea of faking your death. How much do you hate your wife that you're so eager to leave her? My husband, who had been married for 10 years, kissed Rebecca breathlessly while saying, I can't wait a minute longer. The person I love is you. She's just a stepping stone in my career. I just want to get rid of her as soon as possible and reunite with you and our son. Listening to the conversation between the two inside the door, I gritted my teeth and tears fell drop by drop. So all this deep affection for 10 years was just an act. Using my connections to rise to the top was his real goal. Now that he had achieved his goal, he wanted to kick me away. How dare he? Since he likes to pretend to be dead, I don't mind sending you off. After Rebecca left, I paid the funeral home staff. I cut in line for Yates, the first to be cremated. When I saw him again, he was already a handful of white ash. Rebecca was still shocked that Yates had been cremated. I walked over, helped the boy beside her up, and said innocently, There's no way to prove that this child is my husband's now, so you should go back first. Rebecca bit her lip and insisted, This child is Yates' son. He is my biological child with him. I sighed. Where's the evidence? Sister-in-law, I'm not deliberately making things difficult for you. It's just that everything needs evidence. If you don't have any evidence, I can only ask the security guards to ask you to leave. I gave a glance, and 2 security guards immediately walked over. Sarah, when did this house become your place to make decisions? 2 people suddenly appeared at the door. They were my father-in-law and mother-in-law. 2. My mother-in-law stepped forward and took the boy beside Rebecca by the hand, her tone affectionate. Xavier, you've grown taller. My father-in-law also looked at him with a happy face. It seemed that these 2 old things had known for a long time that Yates had a love child outside. My mother-in-law glared at me and snorted coldly. Sarah, you can't lay eggs yourself, and you're jealous of others? How dare you drive my grandson away? I sighed and advised, Mom, there's no evidence to prove that this child is Yates. We can't just believe anyone who says he's Yates' child, can we? Rebecca shouted, You cremated Yates, how can we get any evidence? Hearing this, my mother-in-law almost couldn't catch her breath. What? You burned my son. Her face turned pale, and her body began to tremble. I cried and said it was to let my husband go with dignity, but my mother-in-law went crazy and lunged at me. You poisonous woman! Give me back my son! I calmly took 2 steps back, and the guests at the scene also came up to hold my mother-in-law back, persuading her that the dead cannot be resurrected. My mother-in-law had no way to explain herself, so she could only cry in despair. It's true. She should know that Yates was faking his death. But she never expected me to help him along. The funeral ended quickly. This farce also made the guests look at each other with different expressions. They were whispering to each other. Rebecca was also asked to leave because of insufficient evidence. When I went back that night, I took off my morning clothes, filled the bathtub with hot water, and lit an incense stick. Then while taking a bath, I called my lawyer. I asked him to help me settle Yates' estate. In addition to 15 listed companies, there were 20 properties in the city center alone. And there were also various miscellaneous investments, storefronts, stocks, and so on. Yates' estate was indeed quite large. According to the law, after his death, I could inherit at least 2/3 of it. The more I hated Yates at the beginning, the more grateful I am to him now. He's really a good man. After taking a bath and just wrapping myself in a bathrobe to do a skin cleansing, I heard a rustling sound in the living room. I leaned against the door and opened a crack to look out. A man's figure was rummaging around in the living room, as if looking for something. And this man was none other than Rebecca's brother. I didn't call the police, nor did I go out to interrupt him. I knew what he was looking for, until I heard the door close, and the man went out. I slowly came out, my gaze fixed on the sofa he had turned over. It seems that Rebecca has her eyes on Yates' fortune. I don't care about the man, but I won't give up the white money. The next day, Rebecca came as expected. 3. She took the boy named Xavier by the hand, and her mother-in-law followed. Rebecca came straight to the point and slapped a paternity test in front of me. This is the paternity test between Xavier and Yates. You can see for yourself. I glanced at it, and it clearly said biological on it. I pretended to be puzzled and said, "I thought you couldn't do a paternity test on ashes. How did you do this test?" Rebecca folded her arms and said triumphantly, "My brother came over last night and took one of Yates's hairs." Sarah, you probably didn't expect it, did you? You thought that if you burned Yates, we couldn't do a paternity test? My mother-in-law also pointed at me and scolded me. "You poisonous woman. You were so anxious to burn my son. Were you afraid that if the paternity test was done, Xavier would compete with you for the inheritance? I tell you, I will leave all my son's property to my grandson. You don't get a penny." I frowned and looked at my mother-in-law with complex eyes. "Mom, this test report isn't Yates." Hearing that I didn't admit it, Rebecca immediately shouted, "You're lying. This is the hair found in your house. How could it not be Yates?" I shook my head and said, "But Yates hasn't been home for more than half a month, and the maid cleans every day. How could there still be his hair?" Rebecca had a sarcastic expression. "Then tell me, whose hair did your brother find in your room? Sarah, you wouldn't have a man hidden in your room, would you?" Hearing this, my mother-in-law's eyes widened. She directly started scratching me. "You slut, tell me, have you been cheating on my son behind my back? No wonder you were so anxious to cremate my son. You want to monopolize my son's property and live with your wild man, right?" I took 2 steps back and dodged her attack. I sighed and said, "Mom, why do you believe whatever she says? She's an outsider. I'm your daughter-in-law. Why do you always take the side of an outsider? You're a barren waste, you're the outsider. You should be grateful that you can marry my son. Be sensible and pack your things and leave, or I won't let you go. Get out with nothing?" I just laughed. First of all, I am Yates's legal wife and have the right to a share of his property. Secondly, if it weren't for the help of my father, Yates' company would have gone bankrupt. This mother and son are really good at crossing the river and demolishing the bridge. But that's not the point. I want to talk about the fact that I can't have children. Mom, there must be a reason why I'm so sure this child isn't Yates. I shook my head and took a medical examination report from the drawer and handed it to my mother-in-law. Actually, it's not me who can't have children, it's Yates. My mother-in-law didn't believe it at all, pointing her nose at me and said, "Don't try to pull this on me. Don't think you can shift the blame of not being able to have children onto my son by forging a medical examination report. If my son really can't have children, why didn't he ever tell me?" Yates himself didn't know about this. When I got the examination report, I was worried that he couldn't accept it, so I never told him. Hearing this, Rebecca laughed. Sarah, do you really think anyone will believe your lie? You said Yates is infertile, then how was Xavier born? Even if this diagnosis is true, it only says that Yates has a low sperm count, not that he is completely infertile. Besides, this paternity test is right in front of you. What else are you arguing about? I spread my hands and said helplessly, I've already said that Yates hasn't been back for a long time, so there can't be any of his hair in the house. I casually picked up a short hair from the sofa and said, It's just that my father-in-law has been coming back recently. Could the hair your brother took be from my father-in-law? Why don't you ask Tabitha? Tabitha is our nanny. After hearing what I said, she nodded repeatedly. Mr. Yates hasn't been back for a long time, and I've cleaned the whole house with a lint roller, so there can't be any more hair. Hearing this, my mother-in-law's face immediately changed. Originally, I was just guessing. Who knew that Rebecca would get so anxious, and her voice would rise several octaves? What nonsense are you talking about? How could I have anything to do with Mr. Wallace? I smiled and said, I don't think I said you had anything to do with my father-in-law, did I? Why are you so anxious? Rebecca realized her mistake and said stubbornly, Even if the hair my brother took was Mr. Wallace's, it still makes sense. Xavier and Mr. Wallace are grandfather and grandson, which is considered a second-degree relative in medicine, and they have a blood relationship. So it's normal for the paternity test to be successful, unless Mr. Wallace has no blood relationship with Yates at all. Hearing this, I immediately covered my mouth and looked at my mother-in-law. For Yates is not Wallace's biological son. Yates told me this secret a long time ago, but family scandals can't be made public, and even Wallace doesn't know. My mother-in-law's face turned visibly dark. The next second, a crisp slap landed hard on Rebecca's face. Rebecca covered her face full of shock. Mom. I smiled. Before anything else happened, she already called her mom. You shameless thing, bringing a bastard to our Yates family to claim your ancestry? Rebecca was full of grievances. Mom, Xavier is Yates' child, I didn't lie to you. Rebecca pushed her son, and the boy repeated the same trick, hugging his grandmother's leg again. But this time, his grandmother simply kicked the boy to the ground. Don't hug me, I find you disgusting. Rebecca was full of shock and didn't even understand what had happened. She glared at me angrily. Sarah, what tricks are you playing? What did you say to Mom? I folded my arms and looked at her coldly, as if looking at a fool. Mom, before anything else happened, you already called her Mom. Miss Rebecca, you have a thick skin. Rebecca's face changed. She looked at her mother-in-law, then at me. She probably realized something and left with her child. My mother-in-law glared at me. Sarah, if you leak a word about today's incident, I'll make you pay. After leaving a warning, my mother-in-law also left. Looking at her retreating back, I sneered. For this kind of thing, I don't need to do anything. Someone will naturally leak it out. Not long after the two of them left, my lawyer called me. He said that Yates had 2 more villas and 3 storefronts under his name, all of which had been transferred to Rebecca. As expected, I guessed that Yates wouldn't give Rebecca nothing. These were all part of our marital property, and of course I had to get them back. I asked him, is there any way to get this property back? As long as there is evidence to prove that Mr. Yates gave these properties to others during the marriage, it can be recovered. This is simple. Although Yates' phone had its data cleared, professionals could still recover the data. After recovering the phone data, I copied Yates' transfer records to Rebecca, including the transfer records of his properties. Then I sent a lawyer's letter to Rebecca's house. 5. Rebecca couldn't sit still and immediately made a call. Sarah, what do you mean? What do you mean by sending me a lawyer's letter? I held my phone and said calmly, what do you mean you don't understand? What Yates gave you belongs to our marital property. You need to return it. Why should I return it? Rebecca said angrily. These were all gifts from Yates. He voluntarily gave them to me. Why should you take them back? Because you're the new love, and I am Yates's legitimate wife. Perhaps my words angered Rebecca, she yelled. I knew Yates first. If we hadn't broken up back then, how would you have had a chance? Besides, the one who isn't loved is the new one. The person Yates has always loved is me. The angrier she got, the calmer I became. It was like dealing with a clown. But I and Yates are legally recognized as husband and wife. Why don't we go to court and see if the law protects me or you? Also, what you said about not having a chance with Yates if you hadn't broken up with him. Please get your facts straight. It was Yates who begged me to marry him. When Yates' family went bankrupt, you left him without looking back and turned to another man. Now you have the nerve to say this. Rebecca was anxious. But Yates loves me. He said he would leave all his property to me. Oh. I simply replied with one word. She was obviously very angry with me, and I could clearly hear her breathing heavily on the phone. Before she could speak, I hung up the phone, since sending a lawyer's letter was useless. Then see you in court. I asked my lawyer to organize all the evidence. Every penny Yates gave to Rebecca, I would get back. Unexpectedly, before going to court, something small happened. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had a fight. 6. My father-in-law came home and started a fight with my mother-in-law. And the two of them, at such an old age, even went to court to fight for a divorce. The reason was that my father-in-law suspected that Yates was not his biological son. My mother-in-law immediately suspected me. She walked towards me angrily, pointing at me and said, "Is it you? Are you talking nonsense in front of the old man?" I helplessly shrugged. I didn't say anything. Why don't you ask your husband? Although my father-in-law usually had a general relationship with me, he wasn't the kind of person who would slander people casually. He slapped the table and said, "Sarah has nothing to do with this. She hasn't said anything to me." My mother-in-law said anxiously, "Then why would you ask that? We've been husband and wife for over 30 years. Do you still doubt me?" My father-in-law gritted his teeth and became anxious. "You still won't admit it? Rebecca told me." Rebecca? My father-in-law knew he had said the wrong thing, but he still stood up straight with reason on his side. "You've been cuckolding me for 30 years, and I've been raising someone else's son for so many years. Tell me whose seed is Yates?" My mother-in-law's mind was in chaos. She could only seize her husband's handle. "You and that bitch Rebecca, do you really have a leg? The boy beside her, is he not Yates' child but yours?" "Yes." My father-in-law admitted it without hesitation. "I have a little relationship with Rebecca, so what? Which man doesn't like young and beautiful women?" I sat aside, munching on melon seeds and eating shocking melons. This is too messy, right? My mother-in-law covered her chest and couldn't accept it at all. As for who Yates' child really was, my mother-in-law didn't say it in the end. She just slammed the door and left. This farce ended. Soon it was time for the court mediation. Rebecca insisted that Yates had made a verbal promise to her, saying that all the property would be given to her. But verbal is always verbal. Without substantive evidence, it was still rejected by the judge. And the properties and storefronts that Yates gave to Rebecca were indeed our joint marital property. In the end, it was ruled that Rebecca should return them all. But Rebecca wasn't so easy to give up. One day, I made an appointment with my best friend to go for a spa. When I was free, my best friend was browsing her phone and suddenly called out to me, "Sarah, you're on the hot search." 7. What? I looked at my best friend, and she handed me her phone. On it was a trending post. The username was Rebecca_can't_sleep. It was obviously Rebecca's account. The article was over 3,000 words long, basically stating how much she and Yates loved each other. She even made up stories, saying that I broke them up because of Yates' status as a billionaire. The post quickly gained popularity. The comments below were all full of insults directed at me. "This woman is too much. She used despicable means to climb to the top and broke up a loving couple. Could Mr. Yates' death have something to do with her? Miss Rebecca is too pitiful. She was separated from her lover by a wicked woman, and she waited for her sweetheart for 10 years. This kind of deep affection is really rare. Everyone, please forward this post. Don't let that poisonous woman inherit the inheritance." I looked at these comments and just found it laughable. They were completely fooled by Rebecca's lies. But the masses, after all, always tend to side with the weaker party. My best friend gritted her teeth and said, How can these netizens believe everything they hear? That's not how it is at all. What do you mean you broke them up? I remember it was Yates who chased after you and begged you to marry him. My best friend was so angry that she commented directly under the post. It's shameful to spread rumors. Sarah is my best friend, and it was Yates who chased after my best friend at that time, and Yates had already broken up with her by then. Don't be misled. But soon, my best friend was attacked by netizens. You're Sarah's best friend. You can tell by looking at your dynamics that you're not a good person. You're either posting pictures of luxury cars or brand name bags. You must be a gold digger, right? The same kind of person as Sarah. My best friend pointed at herself, shocked and angry. Me? A gold digger? She laughed angrily. She was a rich young lady. How could she be a gold digger? I advised. There's no need to get angry with these netizens. They don't know the truth. Don't worry. I have a way to make Rebecca get what she deserves. When I got home that night, I arranged for people to collect the opening records of Yates and Rebecca and investigate Rebecca's Black history. My subordinates were very efficient and quickly sent me a document. It was full of Rebecca's Black history. Very good. Looking at the explosive content inside, my expression became more and more excited. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the effect will be when these things are exposed. However, I didn't rush to post these things online these days because Rebecca's post has been very popular. She also took advantage of the heat to start live streaming and even started selling goods. The first batch of goods she brought were some low-quality sanitary napkins. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your trust. Xavier and I are doing very well now. It's just that I can't swallow this breath. Yates died inexplicably, and now Sarah is trying every means to prevent our Xavier from recognizing his ancestors. I used a small account to enter Rebecca's live broadcast room and commented, "Let's not talk about whether this child is Mr. Yates or not. Even if he is, you can be considered cheating on your marriage, right? This child can at most be considered an illegitimate child, and it's normal for others not to recognize him." 8. Rebecca saw the comment immediately. Her face changed instantly. "Friend, please don't talk nonsense with your eyes open, okay? Xavier is not an illegitimate child. I conceived him before I broke up with Yates. It was Sarah who broke us up, and she herself is infertile, so she is jealous that I gave birth to Xavier." I couldn't help but laugh. This lie is really made up on the spot. I directly uploaded a piece of evidence. It was her chat history with Mr. Yates when they broke up. But didn't you and Mr. Yates break up about 10 years ago? Your son is only 8 years old. How could he have been conceived before the breakup? At this point, Rebecca's face completely changed. Where did you get the screenshot? It's clearly fake. Rebecca insisted that the chat history was fake and wouldn't admit it no matter what. At this time, Rebecca's loyal fans in the live broadcast room also began to attack me. Damn, is this a water army bought by Sarah? She even forged chat records to smear our Rebecca. It's so disgusting. That's right, she broke up Rebecca and Mr. Yates. And now she's still trying to splash dirty water on them. Her heart is so black. I looked at these comments and smiled without saying a word. Soon, the record of Yates and Rebecca checking into hotels during their marriage was exposed. Over the past 10 years, there have been more than 300 check-ins. Every transaction, every location, even the time is clearly recorded. At this point, Rebecca's face turned completely white. Some netizens also began to change their stance and stood on my side. Fuck, I feel like these are real. Even the location, time, and hotel name are clearly stated. If anyone investigates one of the hotels, the truth will come out soon. Dare to expose these, it probably isn't fake, right? Brothers, wait, I'm near one of the hotels. I'll go check it out right away. Some people were even afraid that Rebecca would go offline at this time, and there would be no excitement to watch. They commented, "The anchor must not go offline. Wait for that guy to come back, and everything will be clear. If she slanders you, we will also help you get justice." Rebecca's face looked uglier and uglier. She just smiled stiffly and said, "I won't go offline. I believe I will be cleared of my name." Although she said so, I could feel her panic across the screen. However, The person who said he was going to verify it never came back. After a long time, they all thought it was a water army and didn't take it seriously. And at this time, Rebecca didn't know where she got another screenshot of a chat. It was me sending her a message, threatening her to leave Yates. The time was actually 10 years ago. 9. I just laughed. She says I forged the chat records. But she is actually the one doing this kind of thing. Seeing that the person didn't come back, Rebecca put on a tragic act. She wiped her tears and cried. This is the real screenshot of the chat. I've kept it until now, and I didn't want to expose it. But Sarah is really too much. She hired water armies to smear me, and she even smeared my relationship with Yates. Yates is already dead. Why would she still splash dirty water on him? The netizens were all touched by her, and they also felt guilty for their previous doubts. They comforted Rebecca and sent her gifts. The screen was full of rockets flying, and although Rebecca was wiping her tears, I could feel her happiness through the screen. Not only did she successfully smear me, but she could also make a fortune by taking advantage of the heat. Her calculations were really good. Anchor, don't be sad. You can only blame Sarah. She's so disgusting. I don't know where she forged that evidence. Host, don't worry. I will always stand by you and believe you. That's right. The host looks so kind, unlike that Sarah, who looks like she's full of scheming. I've always been on your side, and I firmly oppose Sarah. Looking at the netizens who were once again on her side, a smile finally appeared on Rebecca's face. She thanked her in a delicate voice. Thank you, everyone. So I always believe that the eyes of the masses are sharp, and I believe everyone will give me justice. However, as soon as she finished thanking, the netizen who had just gone to verify the hotel information came back. Don't be fooled by this host. That hotel information is real. In one sentence, the comment area was completely blown up. Really or fake? Brother, are you a water army? No way. I don't know who to believe anymore. The netizen who verified the information replied, if you don't believe me, you can check the hotel information yourself. It's true. The time also matches. Rebecca was much calmer this time than before. She said, don't be fooled by him. He must be a water army hired by Sarah. The netizens in the live broadcast room were instantly divided into two groups. Some netizens woke up, because even if it was a hired water army, the hotel information couldn't be fake. These times and locations are clearly stated and can be checked completely. And some netizens were completely deceived by Rebecca and believed her statement about the water army making rumors. I'm not in a hurry. Watching the heat of the live broadcast get higher and higher, I'm getting more and more excited, until the live broadcast room was full of 100,000 people. I directly posted Rebecca's black material, with pictures and evidence. It was a photo of Rebecca with her black boyfriend 10 years ago. There is even an abortion certificate from the hospital. Even more explosive, there are also photos of her kissing her father-in-law in a cafe. Netizens were really shocked. The comment area was full of exclamations. Fuck, no way. That's Mr. Wallace. The host claims to be Mr. Yates' lover. How could she be with Mr. Yates' father? Oh my God, this is a screenshot from the surveillance camera. It's so clear, it can't be fake, right? I work in this cafe. Let me check the surveillance footage of that day. Soon, the netizen who said he was going to check the surveillance came back. It's true. It's exactly the same as this photo. It's so explosive. These are all Photoshop, don't believe it. Sarah, taking advantage of her status as Mrs. Yates, must have hired a lot of water armies. Rebecca is still struggling. I showed another birth certificate of her son. It has the hospital address and the time of delivery. Her son is actually 8 years old. At this point, she had nothing to say. She closed the live broadcast directly. Netizens were furious after being deceived. Many people forwarded it, and the heat about Rebecca and Yates became higher and higher. My father-in-law's reputation was damaged, and the stock of Yates' company also continued to decline. Fortunately, I had already settled my property. I got a considerable amount of money. 10. Rebecca was also subjected to crazy revenge from netizens for spreading rumors online. As for me, this matter has come to an end. I took the money and traveled around the country with my best friend. In the past, my life revolved around Yates, and I hadn't had a good look at the world. After traveling for more than a month, I returned to Yates' house. I was ready to pack my bags and leave J City, but my mother-in-law grabbed my hand and wouldn't let me go. "Sarah, it was my fault before. Blame me for believing the lies of that bitch Rebecca and misunderstanding you. If Yates knew, he wouldn't want you to leave the Yates family. What's going on? Your son is already dead, and you still want me to be a widow for him? That's a beautiful thought." I pried my mother-in-law's fingers apart and looked at her earnestly. "Don't worry. I will always miss him, after all. This money was also earned by his hard work." I didn't hesitate to drag my suitcase away. I moved directly to my best friend's house. Actually, I got a few of Yates' houses as well, but I didn't want to live in them. Because who knows, maybe there are traces of his life with Rebecca in those houses. Wouldn't it be better to sell these houses? I saw Rebecca again. It was 3 years later. My best friend and I were vacationing in H City, and she was picking up trash on the beach. To be honest, I didn't recognize her when I saw her again. Her son was standing beside her. His once fair face was covered in scars. I don't know who did it. And Rebecca also seemed 10 years older. If you didn't look closely, you really couldn't connect her with the glamorous woman she used to be. Now she was wearing rags, and her hair was messy, looking like she hadn't washed it for several days. "Mom." The boy pulled at her sleeve and pointed at me. "I think I've seen that aunt." Rebecca naturally noticed me, but she didn't seem to want me to see her. She just lowered her head and hurriedly pulled her son away. Later I found out, after she was cyberbullied, she also lost her job. Now she can only hide her identity and come to H City, relying on picking up trash to make ends meet.